To understand the magnitude of the $50 million escape, we must first look at the man who became the architect of his own legend. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán was not just a criminal. He was the billionaire kingpin of the Sinaloa Cartel, a man who rose from the impoverished mountains of Sinaloa to be ranked among the most powerful people on the planet. He achieved this status by pioneering a dark trademark: the use of sophisticated long-range tunnels to ferry tons of narcotics into the United States. However, his rise was paved with tragedy, as his leadership was linked to the raté ending of over 34,000 people. In February 2014, the world thought the reign of the Shorty had finally come to an end. After more than a decade on the run, Mexican Marines captured him in the coastal city of Mazatlan. He was sent to Federal Social Rehabilitation Center No. 1, better known as Altiplano, a place designed specifically to be the final resting place for Mexico's most dangerous individuals. What made Altiplano supposedly escape-proof? The architecture was a masterpiece of suppression. The facility featured concrete walls up to 1 meter thick, restricted airspace, and a complete dead zone for cellular coverage within a 6-mile radius. Inside, an inmate like El Chapo had to pass through 22 separate locked steel doors and multiple identification checkpoints just to reach the maximum security corridor. He was placed in cell No. 20, where 750 cameras and 26 security filters monitored every movement. However, the cartel exploited a fatal systemic flaw, the privacy blind spot. To comply with human rights regulations, the surveillance camera in his cell was positioned to leave a chest-high wall in the shower area unmonitored, providing a small zone of privacy for washing. It was behind this very wall that the most expensive engineering project in criminal history began. The escape, which took place on the night of July 11, 2015, was a synchronized performance of master-level engineering. At approximately 8:52 p.m., El Chapo was seen on camera pacing his cell, a common behavior for someone living in just 60 square feet. He walked to the shower, crouched behind the partition, and simply vanished. Underneath the shower floor, his engineers had cut a perfect 50 by 50 centimeter hole into the concrete. This hole led to a 10-meter vertical shaft with a wooden ladder, descending into a 5-kilometer, 1-mile tunnel buried 30 feet underground. This was no mere dirt crawl space. The tunnel was 5 feet 6 inches tall, just high enough for the kingpin to stand, and was equipped with PVC ventilation for fresh air, high-intensity lighting, and a custom-modified 125cc motorcycle rigged to a rail system. As El Chapo rode the motorcycle toward freedom, he shattered the light bulbs behind him to ensure the authorities would be left in total darkness. The tunnel terminated in a half-built house on a hill, a structure specifically purchased to hide the tons of dirt removed during the 18 months of construction. By the time the guards realized the shower was running for a man who was no longer there, the tunnel king had already stepped out into the night, leaving a $50 million hole in the heart of Mexico's justice system. If you want to understand why this was the most expensive escape in history, you have to look past the dirt and into the ledgers. Building a mile-long tunnel that perfectly intersects with a 50 by 50 centimeter target in a high-security cell requires more than just muscle. It requires an engineering mastermind and a budget that rivals a small city's infrastructure plan. To execute the 2015 breakout, El Chapo's associates didn't just hire laborers. They recruited specialized geological engineers and professional miners who typically build subway systems and large-scale industrial shafts. The first phase began in the Santa Juanita neighborhood, roughly 5 kilometers 9 miles from the prison walls. The cartel purchased a plot of land for approximately $91,200 and quickly erected a half-finished house to serve as the project's ground zero. Under the cover of this unfinished bodega, the engineers began their descent. The technical specifications of the project were staggering. The shaft dropped nearly 33 feet vertically before leveling out into a main tunnel that stretched for over 5 kilometers. This passage was carved through solid rock and dense soil standing 6 feet tall, exactly high enough for the man nicknamed Shorty to stand upright without hitting his head. To ensure the kingpin didn't suffocate during the mile-long trek, the engineers installed a complex ventilation system using PVC piping and high-capacity oxygen tanks. The tunnel was also fully electrified, featuring high-intensity lighting throughout its length. The crown jewel of this $50 million project, however, was the transport system. Deep inside the tunnel sat a custom-modified 125cc motorcycle, likely a Honley or a similar Mexican model, rigged to a sophisticated rail system. This bike served two purposes. During the 16-month construction phase, it was used as an industrial shuttle to haul out the tons of excavated earth and bring in supplies like steel mesh and wooden beams. On the night of the escape, it served as the high-speed chariot that whisked El Chapo to freedom. One of the greatest mysteries was how they removed over 3,000 tons of dirt without being noticed by the 750 surveillance cameras or the hundreds of guards. The answer lies in the clever use of the landscape. Instead of hauling the dirt away in suspicious convoys of trucks, the workers simply spread the fine gray soil across the yard of the exit house, eventually raising the terrain of the property by an entire meter, 3 feet. Furthermore, the noise of the drilling was masked by a nearby public works project involving giant water pipes. The heavy machinery and constant vibrations from the legal construction provided the perfect acoustic camouflage for the illegal drilling happening directly beneath the prison. But even with the world's best miners, you cannot hit a specific tile in a bathroom from a mile away without a map. This is where the blueprint theft comes in. It is virtually impossible to hit that exact coordinate without access to the prison's classified architectural plans. Evidence suggests that high-ranking officials were paid massive bribes to leak the secret blueprints of Altiplano, revealing the precise location of the internal wall structures and plumbing. This allowed the engineers to pinpoint the exact square inch behind the shower partition, the only spot the cameras couldn't see. The planning was so blatant that the DEA reportedly warned the Mexican government about the escape plot just a month after El Chapo was arrested in 2014. Yet, the work continued unabated. Experts note that while a tunnel of this sophistication would normally take up to 2 years to complete, this one was finished in just 16 months because it was being built on high speed for the boss. In the end, the Altiplano tunnel wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was a physical manifestation of a billion-dollar fortune systematically dismantling the integrity of a nation's most secure facility. The disappearance of the world's most notorious kingpin from a high-security fortress triggered what is arguably the most intensive and expensive manhunt in modern history. The Mexican government, reeling from a global humiliation that the state looked putrefied, immediately issued a reward of 60 million pesos, roughly $3.8 million, for any information leading to his capture. However, for a man with a multi-billion-dollar fortune, the bounty was a minor concern. The real battle was a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess involving the Mexican Marines, the DEA, and elite intelligence units who were determined to ensure that this would be his final act of defiance. For 6 months, the Tunnel King became a phantom. Despite being the target of a nationwide dragnet and international red notices, he managed to stay hidden within his familiar territory, the rugged mountains of the Sierra Madre. He moved through a network of safe houses that were mirrors of the prison he had just escaped, hidden, interconnected, and fortified. Authorities discovered that his evasion strategy relied on the same engineering brilliance that fueled his escape. Many of these safe houses were connected to the municipal sewer systems via trapdoors hidden beneath bathtubs and mirrors, allowing him to vanish into the earth whenever the Marines closed in. The turning point came not from a failure of his tunnels, but from a failure of his ego. While on the run, he began reaching out to actors and producers, obsessed with the idea of turning his life story into a cinematic masterpiece. This digital and human trail provided the breadcrumbs that investigators needed. By January 2016, intelligence narrowed his location to a safe house in the coastal city of Los Mochis, Sinaloa. On January 8, elite Mexican Marines launched a tactical strike known as Operation Black Swan. The raid was a scene of absolute chaos. A heavy shootout erupted as his personal security detail fought to provide their leader a window to escape. True to his signature move, the kingpin slipped through a secret door hidden behind a large mirror and descended into the city's drainage system. For hours, he waded through filth, hoping to emerge at a distant manhole and vanish into the city. But the authorities had anticipated this. They had mapped the sewers. When he and his top lieutenant finally emerged and hijacked a vehicle to flee, they were intercepted by federal officers on a highway. The image of the once mighty Shorty sitting in a filthy tank top in a cheap motel room became the definitive image of the end of his era. The aftermath was a total structural shift in how the world handled high-value criminals. To prevent a third escape that could potentially bankrupt the remaining credibility of the Mexican justice system, he was extradited to the United States in 2017. He was eventually sentenced to life without parole plus 30 years and was ordered to forfeit a staggering $12.6 billion in assets, the estimated value of the narcotics he had moved through his tunnels over decades. Today, he resides in ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. In this facility, the concrete is thicker, the surveillance is absolute, and there are no blind spots. The $50 million tunnel bought him exactly 181 days of freedom, but it ultimately led him to a place where the sun never sets on his surveillance, and the earth is too solid for even the greatest engineer to penetrate. The aftermath of the July 15 escape was not just a criminal investigation. It was a total autopsy of a failed state institution. To understand the legacy of this $50 million hole, we must analyze why a facility like Altiplano, designed as a 1-meter-thick concrete tomb, crumbled under the weight of one man's influence. When the Mexican Interior Ministry allowed journalists into cell no. 20, the world saw the physical evidence of a systemic rot. The 22 locked steel doors and the 26 security filters, meant to be insurmountable barriers, had been bypassed not by force but by the greasing of the very hands meant to lock them. The investigation revealed a chilling degree of collusion. At least 18 prison employees, including the head of the prison's video surveillance center, were immediately detained. The aftermath analysis focused on a haunting question. How could a mile-long tunnel, requiring the removal of over 3,000 tons of earth, be constructed without a single seismic sensor or guard noticing the vibration? The answer lay in the surrounding geography. Engineers exploited a massive public works project for water pipelines nearby, using the heavy machinery noise as acoustic cover. But the technical precision required to hit a 50 by 50 centimeter target from 5 kilometers away proved that El Chapo's team possessed the prison's top-secret structural blueprints. As one anonymous guard later admitted, the prison was a honeycomb. If you knew where the soft ground was, it was no longer a fortress. The legal legacy of this escape led to the trial of the century in Brooklyn, New York, following El Chapo's final extradition in 2017. Here, the true cost of his freedom was laid bare. Witnesses testified that the Sinaloa Cartel operated with a monthly bribery budget exceeding $1 million, targeting everyone from local police to high-ranking generals and even former presidents. The 2015 escape was seen as the ultimate return on investment. However, the U.S. justice system responded with a finality that the Mexican system could not provide. El Chapo was sentenced to life plus 30 years in order to forfeit a staggering $12.6 billion, a figure representing the total value of the illegal substances his tunnels had funneled into the global market over 3 decades. Today, the Tunnel King resides in a place that serves as the ultimate contrast to the blind spots of Altiplano, ADX Florence, the Supermax facility in Colorado. Unlike the soft, tunnel-friendly soil of central Mexico, ADX is built into the solid rock of the Rockies. There are no voice end showers with private partitions. Every inch of the 7 by 12-foot cells is visible to cameras and laser sensors. There is no human contact that can be manipulated through grooming and no blueprints that can be bought to find a way out. The legacy of the Altiplano escape remains a permanent scar on the history of global security. It proved that in the NYAC, niche of bizarre survival and elite corruption, wealth can turn a maximum security fortress into a mere stage for a vanishing act. El Chapo Guzmán did more than just escape a cell. He exposed the reality that a $50 million tunnel isn't made of dirt and timber, it is made of the silence of men. While his legend lives on in folklore, the man himself has finally reached a dead end where no amount of money can buy a single minute of darkness. Today, the Tunnel King resides in a reality that no amount of wealth can alter. In the high-security silence of ADX Florence, El Chapo occupies a cell no larger than a parking spot. He is confined alone for 23 hours a day, a condition described by those who have survived it as a clean version of hell. The man who once commanded thousands and manipulated presidents now writes desperate letters to the outside world. In 2023, he sent what his lawyers called an SOS to the Mexican president, claiming he was enduring psychological torment and pleading to be returned to Mexico. Even as recently as 2024, he was reduced to begging a federal judge for simple visitation rights with his wife and brief phone calls with his twin daughters. The billionaire who could pierce through mountains now lacks the power to hear his children's voices.